Jeff Nelson, who was the district governor right after me, so we worked together for a long time, going through the chair. And let me take care of his introduction. Jack's a distinguished Toastmaster over 25 years, a District 12 qualified speaker, and past District 12 governors. Professionally, Jack is a California registered professional engineer and civil engineering, grade 5 water distribution operator, a grade 5 water treatment operator, and a certified cross connections control specialist. He has worked at the private and public sectors, retiring from the Atlantic Valley Water District after 26 years. During his career, Jack has designed water systems, including 3 completely new systems, and managed operations. Water topics and current issues are and widely visible areas. And the example
I go good at pie.
Drinking water field of California today.
Do I have to turn this on or? No, it's already.
All those things. Recently went out and spoke about his 25 or so years in mountain. Said more than 25 years in mountain rescue. You should get a presentation. How many years in mountain rescue?
40, a
Only
little
40.
over 40.
All right, that's sounds like I will already feel safer if I decide to take a hike. And I've been told to do that too on many occasions. But with that, we'll get on to our next speaker, Jack Nelson.
Good evening, everyone. And I stay between the X's, I take it. It's probably best. Water, water everywhere. And not a drop to drink. The ancient mariner. The curse. Water can be a curse, it can be a boon. Just ask the people in Florida. It can be very destructive, small amounts. Town I grew up, or not grew up in, but town I live in, Forest Falls, a few weeks back. Mudslide, localized, destroyed a number of houses and cost 1 life. But we can't live without water. It's necessary for life. So it comes with its good and its bad. I want to focus on some of the sameness of water, but some of the variety that we have to deal with water from a water industry standpoint. California, we have a drought. Some of the other parts of the country have a drought. And that's what prompted, and I think having an overview of the whole drinking water industry might give you a little better idea of what it takes to treat that water and what it takes and what you can do to help save that water. In fact, Earth is about 3/4 covered with water. How can we have a drought? Well, the water isn't where it needs to be sometimes. So we have a drought. Technically, anytime water rainfall for a year is below the average, technically that's a drought, but so we have mini droughts all the time. It's when it's well below or prolonged, and all of a sudden we tighten our belt, and what are we going to do? Of all that water that covers the earth, only 3% is considered drinkable. And 2/3 of that, 2% of the total Earth's water is tied up in ice or some other form that we can't get at it. So we are using for our water use 1% of the water that covers the earth. I'll get into it just a little bit later because there's two factors that affect how we use water: perception and economy, cost. Water industry. So there's that 1%, and that's spread over the earth in many forms, some in the ground, some in streams, some in lakes. And some in little springs or seeps of rainfall. And water to be used now, we didn't always use it wisely. I guess some would say we don't even use it that wisely even now, but we didn't always use it wisely. And then we abused the water so much that eventually in the 70s, the federal government got involved and passed some significant regulations regarding public health. Water is one of the most regulated industries there is. From who gets to use water, who gets to use how much water, how it is used, and if we drink it, the quality. And yet water is spread over all these different types of terrain and different scenarios, different environments water is in, from the desert where there's water either is in seeps or only exists for a short period of time, or we're back east where water, when I say a river, there's water in it. I remember when I grew up back east, and when I came out here and I wanted to see the Santa Ana River, and I went out, and I don't know where the river went, but I saw a lot of sand. Took a little getting used to. And yet Northern California has plenty of water, real water in their streams. So there's a huge variety. And that huge variety means different ways you treat water, how you collect it, how it can be used. I don't want to, we could go through whole courses on that, and that's not the intent here. To give you a quick overview and then focus on a couple of aspects. So, how many people here know what water company supplies their water? You know that what their regulations, what their restrictions are? I mean, why is the price between Yucaipa and Redlands and Loma Linda and San Bernardino, why is it all different? It's all the same thing, isn't it? And it's treated to the same general standards. Well, as I said, regulated, but the regulations give an overview and you start to drill down. Northern California is distant than Southern California, so it's somewhat of a unique state. But you get states at Utah, very dry, and states that are very wet. Vermont, for example. So water is basically regulated under an umbrella for quality for drinking water, but state by state, there are regulations, and it's state by state on who gets to use water, who has the rights to use water, how much they can use. Those are all broken down state by state because it has to be local. In California is really, really interesting, but that's a whole new subject because they have a mixture of some of the Eastern standards and Western standards on how we get to use water. Quality, though, water quality. Everybody has to meet this federal standards, But states can be the ones responsible for that, and they can have stricter standards. And the county even can get in there, getting that act. So it gets into quality of water. So we're in a drought. We just go down to the store and buy some more water. That'll handle the drought at home, right? Quality of water. Well, while every agency has maybe a different type of treatment, that quality of water comes at a cost. And perception. Some people don't like tap water. You know what this is made of?
Tap water.
Tap water. It may have spring water in it, depending on what they're marketing it as. It may have mineral water, but a lot of them is tap water. Tap water is higher quality, the standards required, than bottled water. But why do we drink bottled water? They can cost anywhere from 70 cents to a couple bucks for a bottle. Perception and economics. Why do you drink bottled water? No? Bottled water? Anybody drink bottled water here? Why do you drink bottled water? I mean, it's expensive. 1,000 to 100 times more than tap water. I drink tap water sometimes. Convenience, right? They don't build a pipe that follows me around. Tap water is treated, but once it's treated, then it's got to be gotten to the point of use. So I can go down to the plant or treatment plant with my bottled water and have them fill it up, but I don't think that's really feasible. If I do that though, and this is where bottled water markets a lot. I mean, it's truism. Once they treat that water, they put it in a bottle, it's sealed up. How likely is this to be contaminated? It was met all the standards ahead of time. That's one of the issues with treatment plants and your water that's delivered to your house. So you don't have to go to the plant. It's delivered to your house, has to go through a pipe. In pipe, it can become, there is a biofilm in a pipe. In pipe, it can pick up tastes and things. So they have to add chlorine or some type of disinfectant to it, which usually gives it, a lot of people don't like the taste of that. There's a difference. So you can get all the water you want at a pretty good price when everything's good. But you're going to pay more if you're going to use this. You're going to pay less if you get it through the tap water. Is there a risk, more of a risk with tap water? The truth is, yeah, very, very slight, very, very slight. But there's always, once this is sealed and you keep it, no problem. It's not till I open this thing, it's not likely to get any kind of contamination in it. There's always that little bit of risk with the pipeline. Pipe breaks, somebody gets into a hydrant, or so there's a trade-off on that. Also with that, one of the things we think out, different sized companies. I live in the mountains, a little small mountain community. We get our water from springs, horizontal tunnels, seeps, shallow wells. There is no way to get additional water up there. There's no pipeline. Whatever rain gets dropped out there, that's where that water comes from. A lot of mountain communities, when they have a drought, they have usually very strict rules and regulations on water use, because they don't have some of the options. Like, for example, San Bernardino has a great, huge basin, groundwater, but they also get water from Northern California, Orange County, Northern California, and Colorado River. Other sources imported water. Those all make factors. They're all factors on that. Some mountain communities, Arrowhead, for example, they get the same thing from community I am with mountain water, seeps, horizontal wells, but they also have imported water. So that's a difference. Another difference, I think Crestline's one, they have naturally occurring arsenic in the water. So they had to build an arsenic plant. The treatments differed from place to place, depending on what the groundwater quality of that water is. So we have a limited amount of water, or do we? Said only 3% of that water is potable. Well, there's a lot of ocean water. Why can't we use that? Of course, the only people that really can realistically use it are people near the coast, at least at this point. Cost. That's what held that back up until probably the 70s, when there was a lot of emphasis put in on how to treat that salt and get that water out of there. So there is a huge supply, but it's going to cost. It's going to cost a lot to treat it, and then you got to get it to where it's needed. So that comes to where, with the drought, those are just some of the things that the water industry deals with, although everybody needs it. So it's a great industry to work in because it's not going to go away. We know that. I hope you get a little bit of an idea of why each agency may have different regulations. A few years back, with a prolonged drought in the 2000 range, early 2000s, mid 2000s, the state got involved and put some requirements on the water agencies, not on the people. The water agencies local, they're the ones that deal with the people. So there was some overview ways that the state was getting involved, but it's actually agency by agency. One agency may say you can water twice a week, and one may say you can water every other day for your landscaping. Most of that water, in fact, anywhere from 40 to 60, 80% of your water, depending on the size of the host, is used outside or for non-drinking purposes. So the tips to save can vary. Some are going to be common. If you want to get some real common tips, I took this one, it's from the EPA. We do a list of ways to conserve water. Some of them are pretty obvious, about turn the hose off when you're washing your car, or you don't wash the sidewalk with water, even brushing your teeth. turn the water off in between when you're brushing your teeth and rinse your mouth, little things like that. But then there are different tips, although the key is there are different tips and there are differing penalties. It may be okay to water on odd days in San Bernardino, and Redlands may have a different schedule. And if you go to San Bernardino and say, oh, I can water, and you live in Redlands and you're watering on an odd day, you might get a fine. So one of the things when we were talking earlier about sharing tips, the best way, you can look up, get general tips, but the best way to get the tips, since most of you are probably thrown away that flyer, I'm sure the water companies are real good about getting those out, but most of us, oh, I don't want to read that. It's junk mail till you need it. So go to your water company or give them a call. In fact, ask for a tour of their facilities. A lot of them are more than happy to give a tour, because not only does it educate the public, but it lets them know what it takes to treat that water and distribute that water, and it helps when rate increases come. Water typically has generally been way, way, way undersold. It really didn't cover the costs. And eventually they hope they can pick up money from grant, or did pick up money from grants to cover the repairs that should have been going on all along. It's much better now. A general overview of the industry, hopefully not rambling too much, but you get a little bit of an idea where we were and where we are. We are in a drought. I would recommend go down, touch base with your water agency, find out what the restrictions are, find out what you can do to help and what you can do to spread the word, and ask. I say they're more than happy to give you an education and give you tours. You just need to go and touch base. Mr. MC.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I'm not going to let you off the hook that good, because I'm sure there are some questions from the audience that would like to know. Now, one of the questions, well, I got stimulated, and I've had some conversations with you, got stimulated to think about this whole idea of drought, and because I was driving down from Northern California a number of years ago in a previous drought, and I looked out my window and there was thousands of acres flooded, a couple of feet deep, growing rice. And it occurred to me, I mean, maybe I'm too much of a common sense kind of guy, and I kind of think maybe they should be growing rice in Louisiana where it rains a lot and not in the middle of the desert in California. But you also had talked about something interesting, and that was how clean is that desalinized water? Is it good for you rather than the regular water that comes out of a nice well? And the same way with sewer water. You talked about that a little bit. So maybe fill us a little bit in about the quality of the water that they've treated after it's been in a sewage plant.
From the, yeah, and that is a pretty good speech all by itself. Wastewater. That's what we thought about, right? When we used to use it, we dump it. It's wasted water, get rid of it. Well, when water is scarce, wastewater can be treated. It's one nice thing with water. It can really be cleaned up pretty good. And it can be treated. And wastewater has been used and is being used more and more now. You're looking at ways to use it potably. It is in some ways. It's same cycle as nature. Nature goes through the hydrological cycle. It rains, gets on the ground, evaporates, goes up. All these wastewater plants do is they've hurried the process up. They've found a way to speed that process up. So they treat that water, but costs more. And perception, big thing on perception. So what the industry deals with for wastewater. And I say, we don't always use the water to the best advantage. You brought out with the growing rice in the middle of a semi-arid state. The treating wastewater, going by different names, reclaim water, recycle water. One of the recycle water is basically how it's referred to now, and it's used over, especially the arid states. They treat it to much higher standards, and there are very strict regulations. You have to be trained to use it. And in most cases, since there's enough usage demand for it, just for grass or lawns, or basically agriculture, they try to even discourage grass, but for landscaping, there's not enough wastewater, actually, anyway, not enough recycled water to meet the demands. And as people have become more and more familiar and comfortable with it and with the regulations, the more demand. The Kuiper had put in a system, and they actually had set up in their place where people that weren't along pipe, obviously separate pipelines, where they weren't along pipelines that had recycled water in it, where people could come drive to the plant. They had to get a specific tank, had to be inspected, and people had to be trained on how they could use it. And the word spread. And Saturday, first there would be a few trucks picking up water, and it didn't take very long, they'd be lined up. So it's, I shouldn't be using the term wastewater there because it's a perception thing. It's recycled water, and it is good water. It's just like nature's hydrological cycle, but it's been, that cycle has been speeded up where it might take 100 years for that water to return. You get it back in maybe a month.
Okay, is there anybody else with a question, or anybody on Zoom could pipe up a question too? Does anybody have any other questions from the audience?
Yeah,
Nathan. Nathan's son.
yeah, first of all, absolutely fascinating speech. Enjoyed it very much. Right now, the US uses a lot of chemical blade-based systems to treat water, like chlorine that you mentioned in your speech. In Europe, they use UV systems quite frequently. I was just wondering what your thoughts on that were and what the differences would be in terms of health and other related issues.
So I'm a little harder on the hearing, so
But I am too.
He's asking if we should use UV instead of chlorine like they do in Europe.
oh, yeah.
What would be the benefit?
The issue with and it's a good point. In fact, Europe, a lot of times they're ahead of some of the stuff in the US. So I think they're more willing to take the risk, and they use, and it's been real beneficial. I mean, and Israel's a big leader in that too. The one disadvantage with the UV, at least at this point in time in the US, is it doesn't leave a residual. Okay, if it's sort of like if I went to the plant and picked like the bottled water and I got it right from there, no problem. But when I put it in a pipe, the UV is a treatment process that kills off any pathogens and things, but then it's chlorinated. Even with UV for drinking water, there has to be a certain residual in the US to make sure that water doesn't get contaminated in the pipes. So
the UV cleans it right now, and the chlorine keeps it clean.
yeah, the chlorine, and it's tested. I mean, it's not, we just put chlorine, it's tested regularly. And if there's, all of a sudden the chlorine's gone, they know there's some kind of a demand, there's something there, and it's an alert on that. So I don't know in Europe if they have similar, if they've found a way around that. So, and I say chlorine is one of the types of disinfectants. There's a number of different disinfectants that they can use. And it's basically, as I say, at the plant, you could go down and if you could bottle it right there, that water, I guarantee it's going to 99.9999%, it's safe. Once you put it in a pipe, there's that all little bit of a risk in the US. So that's why that added requirement.
All
Thank
right. Rob, did you have a question?
David Flores online.
Oh, David.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about the fact that the Middle East uses, I believe, quite the majority of their water through desalination plants. So how is it they're able to accomplish that, yet we still can't do it, or we don't do it?
Say, somebody said,
Europe also has a lot of desalinization plants, and yet we struggle to get enough water. Why can't we just desalinate more water like they do over there?
The Middle East.
The Middle East.
Middle East.
there, I don't know all the ins and outs on that. Desalination plants, I think Florida has been one of the leaders out in this country earlier on. But their membranes, it's the technology. I mean, I don't know what the quality of the water, where they may be drawing it from too. Theoretically, you think, yeah, you got a huge ocean.
They have an unlimited supply of oil to help provide the energy to do that.
But yeah, but I think it probably deals more with the technology, which has been advanced. And they, again, in the Middle East, they've been, and I think Israel has been very significant on some of the things. And I think over in the Saudi Arabian area, they've had some desalinization. They were some of the earlier users, but I don't know the full answer. I don't know if there's any kind of rights issue. It didn't seem like with an ocean, but that may be an issue too. Good, it's a good question. Actually, one good maybe to follow up on. I see if I can dig up something on it, because I think that is probably the next. Is recycle water. There's again a limited amount. What gets used can be recycled, but there's a limited amount because you can only recycle what you've used. So I would think that the ocean may provide things that, again, a lot more focused on ecology as well, though, in the environment. So I'm not sure of all the ins and outs on that.
Connie has a question too. Over here, Connie Jameson.
I'm not a big fan of the plastic bottled water. I have some here, but I tend to like to fill up my own at home in another container. But there was some worries in the past, I think, of if you use the plastic bottles and they get warm, is the water contaminated by the plastic itself, or worrisome?
Part of the issue is as technology has advanced, where we used to be able to tell in parts per 100 or parts per million. Now they have the technology at a pretty good cost for the tests. So it's more expensive, but there's a technology to drill down to cost per billion. I mean, not costs, but parts per billion. And now they're finding things that, oh, this might be a problem. And it's some pretty strict standards the way, and it's a little complicated on explaining how the EPA uses it, but 70 years of exposure, drinking a swimming pool, Olympic swimming pool daily, yeah, something. I mean, you have a 1 chance in a million. I mean, they're very, very conservative on some of those standards. But one of the things with the plastic, they found that there was plastic with heat. I don't think it just, they thought plastic was pretty much inert, but you get enough heat and some of this stuff would leach out. And it was a risk. And as they found those things out, that's going back into the industry and where they've eliminated that. Doesn't always happen overnight, though. Sometimes it may take a while. So yeah, there's been some concern. You don't want to put it in the microwave, definitely, for various reasons. But yeah, because some of that stuff can leach in. But some of it is things that we thought were safe. And as we've gotten where we can see finer and finer, that we find out maybe this isn't as safe as we thought it is.
And are those, recently saw a product, it's like a survival straw or whatever, you supposedly can drink from the river or wherever you put it, because it takes that water that you might find if there was a shortage of water in your survival mode, and it would make it safe to drink.
The only way if you drink water and make it safe to drink, it's got something in it, it's going to disinfect it. And by the way, just spraying chlorine or iodine, typically they don't act instantaneously. You have a certain contact time. It may take, depending on what the strength of it is, it may take a few minutes, it may take an hour, but typically, if there's not some chemical on that straw to help disinfect it, you're just taking your chance that you've got some clean water, which at one time, no problem if we get up at a spring, but as again, more and more of us get out and hike and roam around, and there's more likelihood. May still be a real insignificant amount or deal. A lot of things nowadays deal with probabilities. You know, there's always a chance that lightning could strike. You're dead right now, but the probability of it, the likelihood of it, is extremely rare. I'll move. So the drinking raw water, you're taking a chance. So close you can get to a source. It just depends what's in the straw, and there's probably some instructions, or so some exaggerated.
Okay, all right, thank you much.
No.
Thanks both of you, Jeremiah, Jack, both of you for your